Joining us now to discuss markets, of course, is Mathew Tuttle. He's CEO and CIO of Tuttle Capital Management. Welcome, Mathew.
Thank you for having me.
So, we've seen Bitcoin fall since tensions between Russia and Ukraine started ratcheting up. Inflation is higher than it's been in the past year, yet Bitcoin not higher. So it's this whole narrative that Bitcoin is a safe haven, it's an inflation hedge. Has that narrative gone by the wayside?
So I think it's pretty much gone by the wayside. Bitcoin's kind of a cool asset in that it can morph a lot. So there are times when it's a safe haven asset. There are times when it's an inflation hedge. There are times when maybe it's a gold or a dollar substitute. But really, most of the time, it's a risk on, risk off asset. And really, when you've got an environment of fear in the marketplace, that pretty much trumps everything else.
Do you think that because it's been marketed, so to speak, because it's been touted as that safe haven asset, as that inflation hedge asset, do you think that that might, at least for the time being, maybe short term, medium term, hurt its chances with investors who say, look, this thing didn't perform as all the so-called experts on Twitter and Reddit and whatever and Discord have been telling me? Do you think that that's going to make it basically an asset that people will shy away from adopting over the next few months or so?
I think it probably is. Unfortunately, it's such a different type of asset. And for a lot of investors out there, it's something totally and completely new. So, if you go into it with certain expectations and those expectations not only aren't met, but, you end up getting kind of the opposite of what you expected. I do think there are going to be a lot of people that end up shying away from it, at least for now.
Yeah, something that you've pointed out is that Bitcoin is something that people have really strong opinions about, either negatively or positively. So that you would think might have an effect on the market, but you don't necessarily think that's the case, correct?
Well, so I think that's a problem. Whereas if you look at the S&P 500, for example, and I ask you, hey, you bullish or you bearish, typically you're going to look and see what the market's doing. Well, the market's been selling off this whole Russia thing. I'm bearish. Bitcoin is something where you've got the permabulls, and everything that they see they make a bullish narrative. And then you've got, the perma bears, the people who, hey, Bitcoin's going to zero, and everything they see reinforces that. And I think that's the wrong way to look at any asset. I'm a big believer that anything you trade based on what you see, not based on what you think. I think when you start trading based on what you think, you're going to be wrong more often than not, and that's going to get you into trouble.
So speaking about thinking, what do you think is really driving this market? What are the bigger players? How are they playing it right now? Is it that it's just pure risk on, risk off situation with the situation in Russia and Ukraine? Or are there other factors happening that might not seem so obvious to people?
So there are other factors, and I think they are obvious, or at least I hope they're obvious. And it's the Fed, what they're doing with interest rates and inflation. The Russia thing, that's a problem. It's creating volatility, but also, understand it's not the news that matters. It's how the market reacts to the news. And what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, if this was happening during a bull market where sentiment was bullish across the board and everything, yeah, you'd get a sell-off, but it wouldn't be what we're seeing right now. So the real big thing is what's going on, rising interest rates, higher inflation, because the environment that created Bitcoin and, created all the ARK investment stocks going up 100%, that environment was created by the Fed keeping interest rates artificially low. Now that interest rates are going up, all that stuff has to reprice. And, that's what you're seeing happen to Bitcoin, unfortunately.
When I look at volumes this year versus last year, prices are roughly where it was a year ago, yet volumes are much, much less now than they were 12 months ago. So do you think that perhaps, the big issue, of course, was China having restricted trading, if not banning it outright, and making it difficult for people to even think about trying to trade crypto. Do you think that's had an effect, a long-term effect, as to where we are right now with low volumes, prices kind of falling at every bit of bad news, and not going up even with this sort of inflation news and this view of what the Fed is going to do?
Yeah, see, I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is just the overall sentiment now in the marketplace for risk assets. And the overall sentiment's horrible. You're getting it, it's real easy to sell this market off. What's going on in Russia and Ukraine obviously doesn't help. And what you're really seeing now with the repricing of all of these unprofitable technology stocks is, at least with them, and, pick your stock, Roku, Upstart, whatever it is, there's some sort of valuation metric. You can say, hey, Roku trades at X times sales or X time revenue, so it's undervalued. Where Bitcoin has a disadvantage is, what's the value? There's nothing you can say. Hey, Bitcoin trades X times, nothing. So it's just a tough environment for something like that.
Yeah, the maxis will tell you it trades according to the cost of electricity, but so far we haven't necessarily seen that to be the case. Now let's talk about two things: your short-term outlook and your long-term outlook. Short-term, we haven't broken. We've fallen below that $40,000 range. We've been cruising around the high 30s. What would make you bullish? Where would it have to go?
Above that 45,000 range. So, we're big into technical analysis and charts, and there's some big resistance at that 45,000 range. I'd like to see it get above there short term to be bullish. Longer term, I'd like to see it form a base. Right now it's trading wild and loose. It's kind of all over the place. Even if it gets above 45,000, there's a lot of overhead resistance on the way back into the 60s. I'd rather see it form a base. People get bored. Maybe people walk away from it, and it just settles down, and then boom, it breaks out. If that were to happen, I'd be all over that.
Now, that's your bullish scenario, but there is a possibility of bearishness. Where would your support level be? And anything below that is where you'd start to get a little worried about Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, and I'm already a little worried, but anything below 35,000, that would be, an extra, type of signal for me, in the shorter or the longer term. And again, because this isn't tied to anything, there could be a lot of room to fall, unfortunately.